Hello and welcome. With Final Fantasy VII Remake right around the corner, I think now's a great time to get back to the original game. So if you're beginning this game for the first time or you just haven't played in the last 10, 15, or 20 years, I hope you find some useful tips in this video. If you do enjoy the video, give it a like and consider subscribing so you can keep up with my other content. If you run into any questions or concerns, feel free to leave a comment below. And I am going to be putting timestamps in the description so you can kind of skip through the video and pick what you need. And without further ado, let's get into my favorite game of all time. So we're fresh off the train, and the first thing I always take a look at are my settings. So there are a couple things I look at. I like to change the window color to something a little bit more desirable, so I mess around with that for a little bit before I get started. One of the other things is you can look at the sound, controller if you need to customize any of the button layouts. And I think probably the biggest thing that you want to look at is the ATB. So unlike what a lot of people believe, Final Fantasy VII is not a turn-based combat type of game. It actually has an active time battle system. So we want to take a moment to cover what active, recommended, and wait mean. Active just means the action gauge is always filling while on screen, going through menus, major animations. Recommended is the default setting to start with, and it just means that the action gauge is filling up unless there's some type of major animation going on during the battle, like animation for magic or summon or a major attack or something of that nature. And then wait means that it actually pauses the action gauge while you're in the command menu. So if you're looking for a spell, you're looking for a summon or an item or something like that, it actually pauses the action gauge for all the enemies as well as your teammates, so you have a little bit more time to decide what you want to do. And that pretty much covers that. One setting I always change is the battle speed, battle message, and field message. I always move those to the far left to make it fast because I want to kind of speed up the gameplay a little bit. Beyond that, camera angle, magic order, I don't touch those. I just leave those as they are. So just wanted to give a tip in an early section of the game. This screen here is pretty important. You'll come back in a time segment before too long, and Jessie is still going to be here, but she needs a little bit of your help. You have to talk to her when you get here to free her leg because it's stuck. If you don't free her, then you actually can't open a door to progress and continue the game, and so you may run out of time. You have 10 minutes to do it. That's plenty of time unless you forget this part, in which case you may actually run out of time. Let's go over the different stats that we have in Final Fantasy VII. So for starters, we have strength. Strength is very simple. It's used to power up characters' physical attacks, so the higher strength you have, the more damage you do with physical attacks. Then we have dexterity, which is used in a couple different things. It's basically the speed of the character, so it determines how quickly your action bar fills up in combat. It's also used in the calculation for evasion of physical attacks, so you may want to take that into consideration as well. Then we have Vitality. Vitality is used for character defenses against physical attacks. So the higher Vitality you have, the less damage you'll receive from enemies that do physical attacks. Next we have Magic, which is used to power up the magic that a character can use. That includes summons, enemy skills, regular magic, things like that. So the higher the magic, the higher the damage you do with magic attacks. Then we have Spirit, which is used for character defenses against magical attacks. So the higher the Spirit, the less damage you'll take from an enemy that does magical attacks. It is important to note, in the original game, there was a bug that caused the magical defense from armor to actually not be taken into account. So it was purely just from the Spirit stat that you were getting magic defense. So if you are playing on PS1, that is something to keep in mind. I'm not sure if they've actually fixed this bug on the newer editions. Lastly, we have Luck, which increases the chances of a critical hit with physical attacks. It also increases the chance of a lucky evade, which is evading physical attacks. So the higher your luck, the more criticals you perform, and the more likely you'll be to evade other attacks without the calculation of dexterity being factored into it. Now we need to move down and talk about the stats at the bottom here. So first we have Attack. Attack just determines your strength of physical attacks. It's determined by weapon boosts and your strength stat. To keep it simple, attack percentage is basically your accuracy. It determines the chance if an attack will actually hit and is derived by dexterity and equipment for party members. Defense, of course, reduces damage taken from physical attacks, and it's determined by armor and your vitality stat. Defense percentage determines the chance that an attack will miss, derived by dexterity and equipment. Magic attack is just the equivalent of attack, but for magic attacks, so pretty straightforward on that one. Determined by equipment and magic stat. Magic defense, just like defense, but reduces the damage dealt from magic attacks. And then lastly, we have magic defense percentage, which determines the chance of avoiding a magic attack entirely. Here we're going to be covering some really easy combat tips. So the first thing is you can move your directional pad or your joystick to the left, and an option for change comes up. That doesn't allow you to change weapons like you might initially think. Instead, what it does is it changes your formation. So if you were in the front row, it'll move you to the back. If you're in the back, it'll move you to the front, things of that nature. If you move it to the right, you can actually defend, and it will skip your turn, and you'll take less damage if you were to get attacked before your next turn. If you hit the menu button after your ATB gauge is full, then it will skip turns to another character with a full ATB gauge. So this one's particularly useful if you have someone that just got their limit break and you'd like to use it. You can just hit the menu button over and over until you cycle to the other person, and then you can use their limit break. The same thing if you needed to use Cure Magic or something like that all of a sudden. There is an assist button in the game, and if you push it, it'll bring up a little window in combat. That way you can read a little bit more about different skills or even find out the name of the enemy, so it's pretty helpful. You can also use it outside of combat, which is where I think it really shines. The upside down red triangles will show exit points, and the upside down green triangles will actually show you things that you can interact with. So if you're in an area that's kind of confusing you a little bit, you can activate this to navigate it a little bit easier. As far as finding the assist button, it can be a little bit difficult depending on what kind of controller you're using or if you're playing on keyboard. So I am going to show on the screen here the different layouts for Xbox, PlayStation, and keyboard, so hopefully that'll help you find it. Another recommendation, if you're playing on computer with an Xbox controller, the default layout is pretty terrible and it's very difficult to change on your own. So I put a link in the description below that'll take you to a mod and an article that you can read on how to change the layout to what the default typically is in the game for a PlayStation controller, and it makes it much easier. Finally, one last thing that I want to bring up in the combat system. Occasionally you can end up going into a battle with a back attack scenario, basically meaning that you're facing away from the enemy and they get to go first and they attack you. This looks like a worse scenario than it really is. If you want to turn around, you can actually just hit the run buttons and it will flip you around. It's a glitch that still exists in the game today, but ultimately the only thing that really changes in a back attack is the formation of your party. So the people that are in the front row are moved to the back, and the people who are in the back row are then moved to the front, and then this is where the change command that we talked about a little bit earlier actually comes into play, because you can move everybody back to where they were if you need to, in case they were low on health or something like that. So in this section, we're going to be going through just a brief overview of the materia system. So you've got 5 different types of usable materia in this game. The first one being magic materia, which allows you to use magic spells. Think restore, fire, ice, lightning, things of that nature. There is a trade-off when using this type of materia that you do want to be aware of, meaning that if you put on fire, it will take down your strength and your HP, but it will increase your magic damage and your MP. So it's just something you want to be aware of if you're stacking a lot of magic materia on a character. Typically, a good rule of thumb is just don't put things on that you're not going to use. For example, if you're not going to be using fire and ice frequently on this character, don't put it on them. It's just going to weaken their strength, especially if they're heavy physical damage for you. Now, this rule may not always apply, as you will find there are some command materia that actually don't offer negative benefits. They just are positive. For example, steel materia is going to give you +2 dexterity, but it's not going to take away anything other than a slot in your inventory for other things that might be more useful. So something to consider. Then you have command materia. These are things like enemy skill, death blow, stuff like that. It basically allows additional commands into the combat menu. Then we have support materia, which is a little bit more complicated. So support materia, to be effective, needs to be linked with other types of materia. So you'll notice in your equipment, sometimes you have nodes that are linked together. And for example, if you were to put fire in one and then an all materia, which is a support materia, it will add additional effects to the fire materia. So in this case, all allows it to attack all enemies instead of just one enemy, which is what fire would normally do. So you want to try out a couple different things. You really want to mix and match and see what you can get out of this. There are a lot of really great combinations in the game, but I'm not really going to cover those here. Next, we have independent materia. These are materia that add passive effects or stat boosts for character. Passive effect being stuff like cover, which allows a character to cover another character in your party so they don't take damage. There's also materia that will give you more health, experience, MP, money, all sorts of things. And the last of the usable materia in the game are summon materias, which give you access to summons in the game. This has a trade-off very similar to magic materia, where it may increase some of your stats while decreasing others. For example, Phoenix is going to take 10% HP away from you, but increase your MP 10%. So you just want to make sure that you're using the ones that make sense for your party and your individual characters. Last main tip for materia is, and really this is more of a combat tip as well, always have a ranged materia spell on short range characters like fire or something like that always on a character. Otherwise you're going to find yourself in some situations where, because they're short range, they actually can't reach an enemy, and therefore they can't really do any damage unless they have some type of magic ability, or unless they're provided with the long range materia. Using the order function in the menu, you can actually adjust a character in your party from front or back row. Back row being to the far right of the screen. And Barret is a good option for this because he's ranged. If you move a character that is close range to the back row, then you'll notice that their damage actually drops off. They do take less damage, but they actually deliver less physical damage as well. So you want to use the back row for characters that are either support, that are not doing a lot of physical work, mostly magic or summons or healing, or you want to use it with characters that are range based, because then they have a physical damage reduction being in the back row, but still deliver the same amount of damage that they would otherwise. One thing to note, Barret does have a couple weapons that are more close ranged, so it does change that, so you do want to keep an eye on how he attacks as you move through the game. As you progress through the game, you're going to get access to multiple party members that you can switch in and out throughout the game, and you're not always going to have the choice of who's going to go into your party, but ultimately you will, and who you decide to take in your party really doesn't matter at the end. It will just be personal preference. But you should know, your out-of-party members do get experience from battle. They get 50% of the experience, so they will continue to level outside of battles. However, if they have materia equipped to them, that materia is not going to gain any AP. So the materia is not going to level outside of the battle. So that is something you want to consider. When you are switching your party members, if you move a character over and hit the OK button twice, then you'll be able to see what kind of equipment they have, as well as if they have any materia on them. So you may want to consider that and think about taking materia off of characters that would be better used on your primary party, or if you're trying to level certain things. Before finishing your first boss fight, I'm sure you've already used your first limit breaks in the game. They're great skills to have, and when you get access to the option in the menu and you take a look, you'll see that there are 4 different levels for every character in the game. The question is, how do we gain more of these? It's pretty simple, and it works roughly the same for just about every character in the game. So basically, let's take Cloud as an example for this. You start with the attack Braver. So the way to get his next one, which is Cross Slash, is to use Braver 9 times. And then to unlock the first one in the level 2, because there's going to be 2 in level 2 as well, you have to kill 120 enemies. Now, that doesn't mean you have to kill 120 enemies with Cross Slash, it just means in general you have to kill 120 enemies, and then you'll get Blade Beam. To unlock the next one, you have to use Blade Beam 7 times. So it's basically the same format for most characters, where you have to use an ability X number of times, followed by killing X number of enemies to unlock the next tier, and so on and so forth. When you get to the level 4 section, it's not going to unlock the same way. You actually have to do special things in the game to get that last level 4 limit break for the characters. Now, there are a couple different strategies I deploy when leveling limit breaks. If I am trying to use a limit break multiple times to get to that next one in the same tier, I will equip that character with the cover materia. So that will cause them to jump in front of damage for other party members, therefore increasing their limit break because it increases as you take damage. So I will do that if I'm trying to use that ability. If I'm trying to kill characters, then I will equip somebody with a magic materia and an all materia at the same time so that it does damage to all the enemies on screen, and I'll just focus on using that character to kill all the enemies. Ideally, you want to find areas that are going to give you 3 to 5 monsters most of the time when you go into a battle sequence. When it comes to easy kill in this game, this is the simplest method that I know of, and while it does take a little bit longer into the game before you can use it, it can pretty much set you up for the entirety of the game, and you can always come back and redo it if you need to. So one component we didn't really talk about in the materia system is that your materia does level up and it gets stronger with each level. Eventually, if you hit the 5 stars or however many stars the materia has, then it is considered mastered. And when it is mastered, it creates a brand new duplicate of that materia. So for example, in this, we're going to be attempting to master the all materia, which we've talked about several times already. And when you do master it, it will create a duplicate new all materia. And basically all we want to do is go to a store and sell that all materia to the vendor, because it's worth 1.4 million gil, which is pretty much more than you'll need in the game for the most part. If you ever do need more gil, you can always master another one and just repeat this process over and over again. One tip on the leveling of materia, especially for all materia, there are certain items, equipment in the game that will give you double the amount of AP. So you want to take that into consideration. For example, we have the Force Stealer here for Cloud. It will double the AP that he'll gain for any materia in the slot. So I'm going to put the all materia in one of those slots, even though I'm not really going to be using it. I'm just focusing on leveling it as quickly as possible so I can sell it. So there's a weapon pretty early in the game that you can get for Aerith that will actually make her the strongest party member if you move her to the front row for physical combat. So it's called the Striking Staff. You can get it in the Train Graveyard. You basically have to run around for a bit looking for a specific rare encounter. His name is Eligor. And when you find him, you just need to steal the Striking Staff from him. It can take quite a few attempts to do it, but it's definitely worth it. As you can see here, it does increase her stats quite a bit. And like I mentioned, if you move her to the front row, she'll actually out-damage everyone else in your party for the time being, unless you overload her with materia that lowers her strength. So the last tip in this video is just a fun one. It doesn't really matter, but you're told to get a chocobo when crossing this marsh because there's a 30-foot snake in the water. And that is what I would recommend you do, but if you feel a little bit risky, you can actually run across without getting in combat with it. If you are going to do this, then I would save before you do it, because he's pretty strong. He'll one-shot every party member pretty much, and you're just not strong enough to actually kill him at this stage of the game. So make sure you save your game, and then you're waiting for it to get into this far left corner here, and then you can run across and hopefully make it without having to end up in combat. Like I said, this is not necessary. You can definitely just get a chocobo and make this work, but it's fun to do. If you made it this far in the video, then I really appreciate your support. There are so many different things to be said about Final Fantasy VII, so many different tips and information that I could have shared, and I really had to cut down a lot of stuff just to keep this video a little bit shorter. If you have anything that I left out that you think people should know about, please leave a comment below. Let's get that information out there, share it with people that are looking to play this game for the first time, or maybe even some veterans that just didn't know some of these tips when they played it 20 years ago. And thanks again for your support. I appreciate your time. I'll see you in my next video.